Well, here in Texas, we've had quite an ongoing uh, battle. Battle is getting close to the right word. We have, a Republican government in Texas, pretty much across the board. Republican governor, majority of the legislature, many jurisdictions around the state. Although in the large cities and counties, and here in Dallas, we have Democrat majority government. Democrats run everything in Dallas. So we've had in place a fairly draconian, must stay in place, can't go out. We had our county judge, which is the highest official in Dallas County, literally send in the troops to a business in Dallas, Texas, because it was remaining open after the order came out that all non-essential businesses must close. That business is Hobby Lobby. They were remaining open because they do sell the fabric to make masks, which was considered essential, and they sell school supplies, which are vital for all these parents who are now homeschooling their kids. But we have the county officials storm in, literally stormtroops shut down the store, put a notice in the door, you may not any longer be open. So we have some officials taking their signal that this is their time, their kind of inner tyrant can come out. But in this segment, I want to talk about why some of those things happened and why more and more of us have to be alert to what kind of models, mathematical models, are driving this kind of behavior. Because I will say this probably several times during this show. I do think when the virus first became public news and everyone's aware of how dangerous it was potentially could be, I think many, many, many Americans were looking for protection from the government. We're looking for the government to try to figure out what we're going to do. Listening to experts seemed the wise thing to do. So many people, I'll give them the good faith break that they were acting on good faith because they simply wanted to protect, I'm talking about elected officials, wanted to protect their citizens. Everyone was sizing up the danger, and as we were sizing up the danger, we had numerous models emerge that people relied on in making policy. And I'm going to tell you, models, and I've said this in the show before, but it matters to keep in mind as we go forward, because many people will point to models and say, well, look at these numbers, look at these predictions. Therefore, any draconian shutdown, can't leave your house, can't open your business, can't go to work, orders are justified because look how terrorizing these models are. So I want to talk about it. This happened in Dallas County. Dallas is not alone. It happened all over this precious country. But you had, number one, you have models that were simply inaccurate and because they had bad data, made bad assumptions. You also had models driven by some people's political bias. And again, I want to say about political bias. If you're a model maker and you think that your accuracy, your data you put into a model is a life or death decision, and that you therefore should probably err on the side of increasing the hint of danger, increasing the suggestion that there's going to be a serious problem. And the suggestions were not, they're modeling that included things like how many people will contract coronavirus, how many people require hospitalization, how many hospital beds be required for ICU, intensive care units, how many deaths there may be. So if you're a model maker and you are even one of good faith, you're still driven a little bit by the idea that you want to err on the side of claiming this is a serious problem. You don't want to have anyone be able to point to you and say, look at those models. They were, kind of cavalier, and therefore people got a little bit too confident, or they weren't worried enough. They wouldn't be compliant enough with the government's orders because, after all, they got these kind of not so alarming models. But some models were more than just inaccurate. And I want to mention some of them. We talked about some of them on the show before, but I want to just mention some of them to you so you understand. These were not models, made up in the, on a street corner by a bunch of goofballs. These models were attached to organizations that had, at least at face value, a reputable, had a reputation of someone who should be taken seriously. One relates to a prominent model used in much of the decision-making around this country related to shutting down our country, was a model made out of the University of Washington, their Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME, Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, funded by Bill and Melinda Gates. that organization used the model, used numbers more or less that were coming from that organization came up with their own numbers on April 4th, just as an example of how far afield they were from reality. On April 4th, this model that was created, so this is just a few days ago, this is Saturday, the data that was in their model that was used by many jurisdictions in justifying draconian police state measures. On April 4th, the IHME model predicted there would be between 120,000 and 203,000. So between 120,000 or 203,000 Americans requiring hospitalization, blah, blah, blah. In reality, there were 18,000. Reality, how many Americans hospitalized as of April 4th? 18,000, or it's almost 19,000, 18,988. So almost 19,000 was a real number. But as predicted by the IHME model, they predicted between 120,000 and 203,000 Americans. Model way off. And again, this is not a unheard of institution. University of Washington, very reputable university. You have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation behind that. Similarly, you had data that came from a group, we've talked about this in a show before, but I want to mention it again, and this is this COVID Act Now group. COVID Act Now, I want to say, it sounded like somebody jumped into action and tried to do something efficiently. This is the data that was relied on in Dallas County that caused the county to pretty much shut down everything in the county. The COVID Act Now, I'm going to tell you again, I mentioned it one time in the show, but tell you again who the people are behind this, lest you think this is some, reputable medical institution. The founders of this website called COVID Act Now that generated numbers used by officials around the country included Democrat Representative Jonathan Christ Tompkins and 3 Silicon Valley tech workers who are also Democrat activists. So the virus comes, they're dying to have a reason to, the Democrats are dying to have a reason to use this as a major crisis to stir up America, because of course they can then, as they have been, use it to attack Donald Trump and the Republicans. But those people who put together COVID Act Now include Zachary Rose and Max Henderson and Igor Kaufman, all also donors to various Democrat campaigns and political organizations since 2016. A couple of them donated to the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. Prior to building the COVID Act Now website, Igor Kaufman, created an online game designed to raise $1 million for the eventual 2020 Democrat candidate to defeat President Trump. So these people were not unbiased. On top of that, the numbers, they obviously are Democrat activists. They enjoy creating the perception of chaos in this country because they believe that Donald Trump can be blamed for it. They came up with numbers that were so far afield from reality. I'll just share a couple of them with you so you don't think I'm exaggerating. COVID Act Now predicted that by March 19th, the state of Tennessee could expect 190 hospitalizations. 190. They had instead 15. Similarly, the same organization, COVID Act Now in Georgia. COVID Act Now predicted 688 hospitalizations by March 23rd, and said they had fewer than 300 hospitalized. And I could go on and on, but they took their data from that Imperial College. We talked about them before, the Imperial College in England that had come up with these just astonishingly scary numbers, and you use those and you say hospitalized now. So I could continue with this, but one more I will do just to make brief reference. We talked about him on the show before, but at Stanford, Professor John, he has I believe it's a Greek last name. I may be mispronouncing it, Iodonis, however you say his name, Professor Iodonis. He is the professor of disease prevention in the School of Medicine. He holds a chair as a professor of disease prevention in the School of Medicine at Stanford, and he sounded the alarm several weeks ago. Our reaction to this virus is wrong. It's off. It's too much. We are, as he said, basically said, of course we have uncertainty. We don't know how it's going to behave. But his concern, among the main points he made in his piece, think about this. You're with Stanford, and you're trying to calm the leftist-driven hysteria in this country. And yet he felt compelled to put an opinion piece in the New York Times. The example he gave, where he's basically getting at, look, this is contagious and people are going to get it. And some percentage of people will become very ill and some small percentage of people will pass on. But he's saying we are reacting. He said we did a very, very different public policy if we're reacting to projected 2 million deaths or 3 million than a far lower number. So he's looking at mortality rate. How many people in our country who contract this are likely to die? One thing he talked about, he had the only example they had at the time, which was a closed population of people, was that cruise ship, the Diamond Princess cruise ship, where they had people contracted and it spread very quickly throughout that cruise ship. In that cruise ship, they had 700 infected passengers. 700 contracted the coronavirus. They had among that 700, 7 pass away. 7 real death rate. And so he talks about the death rate there, which is 0.125, and says even if you take the normal statistical assumptions about the this percentage could be wrong, the death rate could be inaccurate, so you do a range below, range high, he's still saying the real death rate could stretch as far as 0.025 to 5 times higher, which is still just 0.625. I am not saying that the deaths of individuals don't matter. Obviously, everyone's life matters. We make policy to protect life. But it gets around to the last thing I want to remind you, 2 last things about data before we get to talking about what we're going to do about this in our country. One thing that I want to mention is that even the Fauci, who is running our whole reaction to the coronavirus, said in a piece in the New England Journal of Medicine, and this was in, I believe, February, I don't have the date in front of me, but in February, based on all the data he knew, he said, we're likely to have the overall clinical consequences of COVID-19 maybe more akin to those of a severe seasonal influenza, which has a case fatality rate of approximately 0.1. So even he, the architect of our everyone stay home and don't do anything, is saying it's a low death rate. I'm not saying death rate doesn't matter. I'm saying you have to have those factors in order to get to the proper policy, which ties me into what I want to remind you again on bad modeling, where we are. You had Dr. David Katz. He is with Yale University. He's the president of the True Health Initiative and the founding director of the Yale Griffin Prevention Research Center. His institution is so well respected. He gets CDC research money. Katz wrote in the New York Times that we had approached the threat we all face from coronavirus with the wrong model. His words, I talked about in the show before, but today I've linked this story. You can read it yourself in his words. His basic argument is that we should have responded to the coronavirus with a vertical interdiction. A vertical meaning you focus in on the susceptible people. You focus in on those who are vulnerable, which are, people of a certain age, health backgrounds, immune deficiency for whatever reasons, other health challenges that make you more vulnerable. Focus public policy on protecting them. He was saying that's what we should have done. We did instead was horizontal interdiction, that we went about handling our reaction to coronavirus by telling the broad swath of perfectly healthy American people that you have to stay home, that you must stay home, that you are frozen in place. And he was saying this horizontal interdiction, even he talked about this can have a very detrimental effect, not just on our country and on people not being very happy, but actually in the whole way our culture deals with and responds to this virus. So I'll tell you one more data point that is just, I think, impossibly important, and then a story. In fact, I'll do the data point and then the story to tell you what is happening in our country. We have a media. We have bad models predicting death numbers. The models have been wrong in case after case after case. I only read a few of them to you. I could have read more data to tell you again that many models have been wrong, and they have all been predicting more contractions of the infection, more hospitalizations, and more deaths by orders of magnitude than are actually happening. But one last piece, and so all of that can fall under the category of, okay, we're trying to be really, really careful. So, we're thinking we better just alarm people because maybe they'll behave better and honor social distancing and all the things we're supposed to be doing. So we're making, exaggerated predictions. It's not okay to do that, but maybe that was in the back of the minds of some people. But I want to tell you something CDC did. And we've been talking about these kind of things in the show. I didn't go into this, I don't think, last week, but I want to be sure to mention to you. CDC, the Center for Disease Control, which is the official organ of our country that puts out the information that tells people percentage of people at risk, people who have contracted it, people who have been hospitalized, people who have passed on from it. They're the official data crunchers. The CDC put out official advice in this country telling hospitals to list COVID-19, the disease you contract from coronavirus, to list COVID-19 as the cause of death in cases, even if you're just assuming or it only contributed. So they're saying, even if you're just making an assumption, you can list coronavirus as the cause of death, COVID-19 as the cause of death, when you really don't know it was the cause of death, or if it only contributed to the cause of death. So now there's new data out showing that, every year, sadly, in this country, we lose people to a variety of diseases, including pneumonia. Well, there's now data out showing that the number of deaths from pneumonia that are lower than normally, they're below the norm for where we should be right now, while all these COVID-19 deaths are listed as, it seem higher, but it's because the hospitals are being told, if a patient dies of pneumonia, but it appears you assume maybe COVID was part of it, or maybe COVID-19 contributed to the cause of death, put the cause of death as COVID-19. The point, my friends, is that we have the official arm of the federal government pushing up the numbers, trying to increase the numbers of people in our country that are listed as having died of COVID-19. And I'm talking about artificially, dishonestly lifting those numbers up, pushing numbers higher to frighten and scare Americans. So last thing is just a very, this little case I'll mention just in a moment, but in the state of Connecticut, we actually had very sadly, a baby, an infant, I think it was 6 or 7 week old baby, died over the weekend. The Connecticut governor put out the story that this was actually the first known death of a baby of coronavirus. And so you're thinking, my gosh, obviously it horrifies everyone. It frightens and horrifies mothers and pregnant women and just everyone. A baby died of coronavirus? How could this be? So Candace Owens, never one to hold back when she's concerned about something. She dove into it. Candace Owens, the founder of Blexit, the Black conservative activist, she dove into it and it appears was given information by the hospital. Someone from the hospital contacting her saying, what, actually, that's not really right what the hospital said, attributing the cause of death of this baby to coronavirus. The baby, sadly, seems to have been asphyxiated, or whether it was an accident, the baby was in the care of a caretaker, whether the asphyxiation occurred, sadly, unfortunately, or by accident, but for whatever reason that can occur, could have been sudden infant death, could have been just an unfortunate accident at home. The point is, the baby was non-responsive and did pass on due to asphyxiation. And the autopsy included, the baby's been exposed to coronavirus. These are two different points. The fact that, and heaven forbid, I'm telling you, friends, the idea of losing a baby, any parent on the planet knows to lose a baby has to be devastating. I am not in the slightest, mitigating their loss or in any way. I am just saying that this is a great example of the government using coronavirus, COVID-19, to spread fear. In the case of Connecticut, probably also to access more tax dollars in their state because they have now a recorded death of a baby. And so now the hospital, because Candace Owens raised such a point about it. In fact, she has called for the governor to resign. The hospital is actually looking into it again, saying, yeah, we'll get back to you about that. We're not really too sure about that.